YouTube? This is Nate Quinn, and this is part 3 of episode 3. Again, going to preface this like I do with all the other videos that I am not a medical professional. I am not a healthcare provider. I am just a person who's gone through some experiences, and I'm seeking to share my story in the hopes that it helps other people share theirs and reduce their shame and stigma. So last episode, part 2, episode 3, concluded with me telling my wife the day before we deployed that I had experienced a moral injury and that I was going through some stuff. So deployed the next day, and my hope was that the deployment would provide me some much needed distraction. I had hoped to kind of lose myself in my work, so to speak, give my mind something else to focus on. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The operational environment we were deployed to in support of Juniper Shield was not conducive for that. We were extremely limited in what we could do in terms of how we could help our partner force. Now, all that being said, we had our expectations, I think, pretty appropriately managed. We didn't go into this deployment thinking we were going to get into a gunfight. We knew the AOR we were deploying to was very restrictive. And so we had conditioned ourselves that, hey, this is going to be a lot of by and through a partner force, right? Special forces is supposed to operate by, with, and through. We just weren't doing the with part, which was fine. But I think we were still disappointed with how much we could actually help our partner force. If I thought my previous deployment was hyper risk averse, this one took the cake. This was far more stagnant, I think, of a trip than even my team had anticipated. So put another way, we were bored and we had a lot of time on our hands, which for somebody who's trying to find something to distract themselves and distract their mind is not a great equation. The little work that we did have became pretty mundane, at least to me. I didn't really feel like we were making much of a difference, or that we were being value added to where we were. I did what I could to keep myself busy. I tried to find work to do to help the team, to help out with the mission. A lot of guys, myself included, we started working out twice a day because there was nothing else to do. So you wake up in the morning before 7 o'clock, before the temperature hits triple digits, to try to get a run in. And then in the afternoon, you try to get a lift in when the sun goes down, so that the weights, which are out baking in the sun, aren't like super hot. But even that was a struggle, really, again, to provide myself that distraction that I needed. For whatever reason, now the intrusive thoughts, they started to circle around self-harm. And I became concerned that I was going to hurt myself, right? That I somehow couldn't trust myself. So anybody who's seen Evil Dead, the old school one,
You bastards!
started becoming, for whatever reason, concerned that was going to happen to me, that somehow my body was going to take over and try to hurt myself. This is particularly troubling because while not a full combat deployment, this was an operational deployment, and the environment was semi-permissive, meaning there was an opportunity, or there were opportunities for things to become kinetic, where we could get into a gunfight. In fact, the first couple weeks we were there, the major city that we were close to, was attacked. So we were always armed. Anywhere I went on the camp, I always had a loaded sidearm with me. And obviously when we went out on mission or patrol, we always were in full body armor. I had a rifle and a pistol with me. So, being concerned about self-harm, but always being armed with a firearm became very challenging for me. And it started getting to the point where, I would try to like keep my guns in a corner of the room, of my room, right? Where like, don't look at them. Because if you look at them, you might have an intrusive thought about them, or you might think about them, right? I didn't know what an intrusive thought was at the time, but to me, it made sense. And it started getting to the point where, I couldn't even focus on work anymore, right? I would try to go into our operations center, which is where my desk was, basically just a bunch of different computers where I answered emails and phone calls. But the intrusive thoughts started to like interrupt my work, interrupt my workouts, right? I'd be working out and then I couldn't stop focusing on them, and part of that was because I was trying so hard not to focus on them, which again, not a great technique. We'll get into that when we get to actually addressing intrusive thoughts specifically. I started sleeping like absolute crap, and because I was just like shaking with anxiety, like I think eventually I would fall asleep, but it would take me, and this is not an exaggeration, it would take me almost an hour because I was just so anxious about these intrusive thoughts. And I couldn't stop thinking about them. And eventually I would just fall asleep due to sheer exhaustion. But I mean, I was running on like 4 or less hours of sleep, and that was all self-imposed, right? It wasn't because we were so busy. It was because I was keeping myself up, not intentionally, but like I could not sleep. I was just so freaking anxious. So then, about 6 weeks into the trip, out of the blue, without prompting, my mom calls, or my mom texts, right? And she says, "Hey, are you okay?" And this is kind of weird because I definitely didn't tell her what was going on, right? The only person I had remotely broached the subject with was my wife, and I didn't really lay out the full scope of what I was experiencing because I had hoped that the deployment would reduce that issue, make it go away. Like I just need to deploy and I'll be okay, right? That was my mindset. And maybe I would have been. Maybe if the deployment was more involved and we were busier and I was doing the thing that we thought we'd be doing, maybe things would have turned out. I don't know. There's really no point in speculating about that because it doesn't matter, right? Can't go back and change it. What happened, happened. But my mom called me and she texted me and she said, "Hey, are you okay?" And she said she was worried. And so I was like, man, this is just wild. Like maybe it's mother's intuition. Who knows these things? But I ended up telling her everything, right? Like, hey, this is what happened, the moral injury. These are the intrusive thoughts I'm having. Like, I am freaking out. Not in a good spot. And, I also explained to her that I was frustrated because like this made no sense. Where we were in the world was a very not awesome place to live, right? On a regular basis, when I was out on patrol or driving to and from in our vehicles, like I would see people that, were literally living in straw shacks, or with like a sheet metal wall and a straw roof, right? Folks that, hey, we're not entirely sure where our next meal is coming from. Water was a scarcity, and these folks were happy. And, and I looked at them and I was like, yeah, this makes no freaking sense. Like objectively, I have no reason to want to kill myself, right? Compared to what I'm looking at right now, and these folks are smiling, they're happy to see us, and here I am, unbeknownst to me, like depressed and worried about killing myself. I was like, this makes no sense. Like, why? I've got a good job, pays well, I'm healthy, family's healthy, wife's healthy, baby's healthy, friends, like on purely an objective perspective, this makes zero sense, right? And I was like, I just don't understand. I don't know what's going on. And I think that also amplified the anxiety, was like, I do not understand this. I don't know what's going on. And it was at that point that my mom revealed to me that there were some genetic propensities for cognitive injuries in our family, on her side of the family. And so now I was like, okay, this isn't just in my head. There is maybe a physiological component to this. Like, all right. Then I texted my wife and I was like, hey babe, this is what's going on. I basically had that same conversation all over again that I had with my mom, I now had it with my wife, and she called me. And again, there was like a 5 to 8 hour time difference between the two of us, where she was and where I was. And she called me bawling her eyes out, begging me not to do anything, not to hurt myself, because she did not want to, and said she could not raise our child by herself. And so she asked me to, get some help. So that night, that was already a really stressful evening for me, and it got worse. So I was like, okay. And I think, God, I don't even know what time it was. I think it was like 11 o'clock at night, 10 or 11. It was late. But I knew I had a decision to make. On one hand, I didn't want to leave my team, my ODA, especially because I finally felt like I had earned a spot on that team. Like, hey, the captain's here. He's part of this team. It's official. Like, he's our captain. And I feel like that was a long journey to get to that point. And I didn't want to leave my team on a deployment, especially not in a location where, we were exceedingly isolated. Like, we picked this trip. We wanted it that way because to our minds at that time, that was one of the most Green Beret missions available. But I didn't want to leave them there because we're out in the middle of nowhere, and if things go south, they're going to go way south, like really, really fast. Help isn't coming for a hot minute, and so it was just going to be us. And I was like, man, I was like, if I leave and something happens and I'm not there, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to be able to live with myself? And I didn't want them to feel like I was abandoning them or that I didn't care. And so I wrestled with this for probably like an hour and just like tearing myself up internally. And then I stopped and I was like, okay, let's think about this unemotionally. Let's remove emotion from this for a minute. If the roles were reversed and one of my guys came up to me and said, hey, sir, I'm feeling some kind of way, right? Laid everything out to me, I would be like, bro, we're going home. Like, we're getting you home. Like, not even a moment's hesitation, right? Like, this deployment, important, maybe, kind of, not worth you. Like, not worth losing you over. Okay, so we're going to get you home. And then it's like, okay, so if I can apply that logic to a team guy, then why would I not apply that to myself as a leader? And so, I was like, well, because I'm the captain. Like, I can't just leave. And it wasn't because I was worried that the team would be lost without me, right? My senior NCO, my warrant, they were highly competent. The team was highly competent. We were the best ODA in the company and probably in the battalion. And that wasn't because of me. It was because of the team. And so I knew they would be fine without me. They didn't need me. I was value added, but I was not a necessity, if that makes sense. And I think that is the sign of a good unit, is that it can stand the loss of personnel or a leader and still function just fine. And I knew my team would be fine. I just didn't want to leave them. I was worried about them. But I ended up swallowing my pride and basically telling my ego to shut the fuck up. And I went to my senior NCO and I pulled him aside and I said, hey man, I need to talk to you. You got a few minutes. We went up to this little tower that we had made. We started calling it Top Golf because it had like a little golf turf thing on there and folks would go smack golf balls off of it. And we sat up there because it was pretty isolated. This was a very challenging conversation to have because it meant that I had to make myself vulnerable to another Green Beret, right? So not just my wife anymore or my mother, but like another Green Beret, which is very challenging because sometimes we feel in the community, in the soft community, that we have a reputation to uphold and that any admission of weakness or softness is a failure on our part. And so this was a very difficult conversation to have. But I explained what was going on and I wanted to get his 2 cents worth. Like, hey dude, you've been doing this for almost 20 years. You've been playing this game for much longer than I have. Like, this is what's going on. What do you think? Right? And if it had been anybody else on the team or any other Green Beret, I would have been like terrified of what he was going to say. And I still was just to a little bit, but because he and I had developed a relationship of trust and we were very like-minded in our approach, um, I valued his judgment and I relied pretty heavily on his experience and his knowledge, and we clicked. And I trusted him, and I trusted that his feedback, based off what I had come to experience over the past year of our training, like I trust his feedback was going to be free of judgment. And he was exceedingly supportive. He was like, "Hey, dude, nah, man, it totally makes sense." Like, and he said the same thing I told myself when I had reasoned, if the shoe was on the other foot, what would you say? He was like, "Hey, dude, man, ain't nothing here that's worth your life. Like, no one is gonna know. Like, if something were to happen to you and we said it happened in this location, nobody would be able to point to it on the map, and it wouldn't matter. And so, like, fuck this place, basically. Like, let's get you to talk to somebody. Let's get you home." He also, recognize that it was a hard conversation. Like, hey man, that couldn't have been easy. But I mean, the amount of relief that I felt that, like, again, somebody else knows about what's going on, and it's a Green Beret, and it's a team guy that I trust. He's on my team, and he knows, like, all right, I'm not in this alone. Like, somebody else, there's another layer of security, right? So I told my wife, my mom, now I told my team sergeant. And I was adding layers of security, like, hey, there's a safety net, so to speak, in case something goes way south, right? So we went to our operations center, and I called out one of our providers. We'll call him Barry. Barry will come up again. But just like an informal conversation, right? Like, hey, and so I laid out the wave tops. I didn't get into the details really of what I was going through, but I was like, hey man, this is what's going on. So I gave him the quick version, and then he's like, yeah, I think we need to get you home. Let's talk to the company command and see what they say. And I'm like, all right, hey, cool, man. Like, I defer. Like, I had completely surrendered everything, right? I was like, hey, my priority is my life and my health and well-being, like, regardless of the outcomes. Because as a Green Beret, right, when we have security clearances, like, what a common concern for guys on the team is like, hey, am I going to get kicked off a team? Another common concern is, am I going to lose my security clearance? Another concern is, am I going to get my guns taken away? And I mean, the guns one extends beyond just soft Green Berets, like dudes in the military, period. Cops, you're a layman, right? Hey, are they gonna take away my guns? Like, that is a genuine concern that a lot of males have, because, like, now you're taking away our ability to protect ourselves and the people that we love. So that's a significant stop to that. But I put all that aside. I was like, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is making sure I'm okay, so that I can I can do what I need to do and be there for my family and my wife and child. But that was a very tough fucking decision to make. So they're like, hey, we're gonna get a plane out to you guys. They're gonna come, Nate. We're gonna bring you back to headquarters, still deployed, but we're gonna have you talk to a professional and see what that person thinks, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. So plane flew out. My team sergeant told the team, like, hey, Nate's going through some stuff. It's okay. But we're gonna get him home. He's got some personal things to take care of, right? He kept what I told him between himself and I told my warrant to, and he was also very supportive. And then the whole team came out that afternoon when the plane landed to see me off on the plane. There was still some discussion as to whether or not I was going to be able to come home or come back, and nobody really committed to making a decision one way or the other. But I think we all kind of knew in the back of our head, like, I'm not coming back from this, like, to this trip. And so that was kind of the last goodbye. And, like, getting on that plane and leaving my team behind in that location, my whole ODA, was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. Not a good feeling. I felt like I was abandoning them. I felt like I was quitting on them. I worried that they somehow thought less of me, like I was quitting. Even though objectively I was like, hey, I know these guys, and I know probably they're not thinking that, but emotionally, that's where my head was at. But again, I had to swallow my pride and my ego and tell myself and my pride to shut the fuck up. So I got on that plane. And this is a good stopping point. I'm gonna have to break this up into 4 episodes, at least. But we're almost there. We're on the tail end here. But yeah, so I'll end it there. Please either like the video. It helps with the algorithm gremlins. Share the video with people who need to hear that they're not alone. Share my experience with them and say, hey man, like this dude is going through it too. All right. Subscribe up there. Watch that video down there. But yeah, glad you guys are here. Glad you're listening. And I'll see you all at the next one. Until that time, I'll see you.